Welcome to You Can Talk to Me, a Beatles podcast. It's time to make our way across the universe and talk all things John, Paul, George and Ringo.
Amelia, welcome along to You Can Talk to Me, a Beatles podcast. Thanks for making the time to sit with me.
Thank you for having me.
Looking forward to the chat because I know that photography's played a very big part in your own life, and we will get to Jim's incredible journey as well. But could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how important photography has been in your own life along the way?
Yeah. Well, I studied photography at UC Davis in California and graduated with a studio art degree, and then came to San Francisco and started trying to show my photography. My photography is very different than Jim Marshall's in the sense that it was kind of fine art photography. And so I do conceptual photography. And the photographers that we learned about at school were Helen Levitt and Cartier-Bresson. So I really didn't know who Jim Marshall was when I was studying photography. And then my mother actually was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so for me, I went through the journey with her. And this was back in like 1994. And there were not a lot of photographs of women with mastectomies, which was the only option my mother had at that point. There were just like thin, faint line sketch pencil drawings of mastectomies. And unless you knew somebody else who had a mastectomy and would let you see it, you really didn't know what it was going to look like. And so my mother was older. She was living by herself. And so the surgeon didn't really care what the scar looked like. He just figured it's an older woman. She lives by herself. Let's just get the cancer off. So, and of course, when the bandages came off, it was not a thin, flat, faint scar. It was really horrible, and my mother was just devastated. And so it was at that point that my photography actually took a completely different road. I decided that I could use photography as a tool to really help women and the public see what breast cancer was like realistically, because nobody was showing it. And these women would have horrible images in their head and they'd be afraid. And also for their partners or anybody who was caring for them, they didn't know what it was going to look like either. So that sent me on a 6-year journey of photographing women with breast cancer or lumpectomies, anything that had to do with breast cancer, reconstructive surgery. And then they wrote their own experience with it, because every woman's experience is different. What might be right for one woman may not be right for another. Some women want reconstructive surgery, but some of the other women said, I don't want reconstructive surgery because I want this as a battle scar for me to see every day and know that I have overcome this. So when actually I met Jim, it was me not knowing who he was. I was doing this breast cancer book, and my mother had actually just recently passed away. She passed away before the book had been published. It wasn't from breast cancer. It was from diabetes, which she was diagnosed at the same time as breast cancer. So she never was able to see the book to its completion. But it was my friend's 30th birthday party, and I went to the birthday party, and there was this little man with a Leica around his neck, and he shuffled over to me and he goes, "Hey, how's it going?" I said, "Hi, how is it?" Not knowing who he was. We started talking. He goes, "Hi, I'm Jim Marshall." And I said, "Hi, I'm Amelia Davis." And he goes, "What do you do?" I said, I'm a photographer." I said, "What do you do?" And he smiled and he said, "I'm a photographer." And we started talking, and I was telling him about my breast cancer book, and that I was looking for a publisher. I was using all my own money. It took 6 years, but it was so important to me. And he said, "Wow, I really support you in what you're doing. I think that's very important. I have a lot of friends who have had breast cancer, and I'd love to help you however I can." So then we started talking more, and it turned out I literally lived a block away from him. And we didn't know it. And he goes, wait a minute, because I live in a gay area of San Francisco. And he goes, wait a minute, are you gay? And I said, yes, I am. And he goes, oh, I'm always attracted to gay women or married women. And I looked at him and I go, that's your problem, not mine. And he laughed and he said, I think we're going to be really good friends. And so we exchanged phone numbers. And the next day he called me up and he said, I really liked you. Let's grab a cup of coffee. So we went down the block and had some coffee. And then he said, I need an assistant and I really like you. Would you be my assistant? And I was like, sure, I need money.
Yeah.
Yes. And he said, come on, let's go up to my apartment here and I'll show you. So we walked up, opened the door, and it's an Edwardian apartment. So it was kind of a railroad apartment, a huge hallway where rooms came off of. And on the wall was one iconic image after another. You know, Jimi Hendrix burning his guitar at Monterey Pop, the Beatles' last concert at Candlestick Park, Johnny Cash flipping the bird. And I just looked at him and I was mortified. I said, oh my God, I had no idea that was you. And he goes, that's why I liked you. And it was from that point on, you know, the next 13 years of my life was Jim Marshall.
Yeah, what a great story.
Yeah. And so so my photography, it was really, I studied one thing, it went to another, it took a different road, but by going down that road, I actually met Jim. And
Yeah.
so I also did another book on multiple sclerosis because I have MS. And when I was diagnosed right when I started working for Jim. And he was like, I don't know, what the fuck is that? You know, he was Jim was this big guy who just didn't care what he said. And I don't know what is that? And through me working for Jim, he really saw what MS was and, you know, the ups and downs of it. You know, looking at me, I'm in remission and I've been on medication since I was diagnosed. So on the outside, I look completely healthy, but on the inside, my body is battling itself. It's an autoimmune disease. And so sometimes I would get sick from the medication and Jim would see that. And so he really had an appreciation for, you know, people who are living with a chronic illness. And I ended up doing another photo book on people living with MS, all the different ways people look. So you could look perfectly healthy like me and not know that my body's battling itself daily. But I also, you know, photograph people in wheelchairs with canes and things like that. So I think with Jim, it was a similar kind of photography in the sense that, I know that sounds weird, but Jim would pick subjects, a lot of times early on, African-American subjects who he thought were underrepresented and didn't get enough attention for their talent. So he really photographed them. And in a sense, I was photographing something that, you know, people didn't want to look at necessarily because it you know, reflected their own mortality. But the only way we can learn about something and accept it and get a conversation about it is by confronting it. And, you know, photography is such a great tool to do that. So I think he respected what I was doing because I was drawing attention to something that really needed to be discussed and talked about through photography.
Thank you for sharing so much of that and being so vulnerable. It's a very powerful testimony, and you seem to have been allowing life to inform art as well. And
Yeah,
sometimes through the lens, I imagine you can give people back a sense of humanity as well.
absolutely. Yes. And they can form their own story, basically.
Yes.
You know, they can really represent to the world the way they want to be represented, rather than looking at them as somebody with a disability or with a cancer. It's like, I'm a human being who has overcome something. Don't feel sorry for me. You know,
Yeah.
I'm doing something about it. So
Yeah, it's very powerful. I read a quote from Jim in trying to do a little bit of research to get an understanding of the man behind the lens, I guess. And I came across a quote where he said he believed in shooting with your gut focus
Yes.
in on emotional truth rather than camera settings. And
Yes.
I thought
That
that
was
statement
Jim's.
seems to say a lot. And then you seem to be reinforcing that in your telling
Mhm.
of him as well.
Yeah, and when I first started working for Jim, Jim used Leica cameras, which are all manual cameras.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because getting into the techniques of technical parts of cameras, but they're manual and you don't look through the lens. It's not a single lens reflex. It's a viewfinder. So you look to the side of your lens. So if you're not used to viewing and looking at things that way, it can be very difficult. And you load the film from the bottom of the camera. So, but because you're looking at it through a viewfinder, it's very accurate. So it allows you to compose exactly what you're seeing in that viewfinder is what you're going to get. So when I first started working for Jim, I was using a Nikon, and he said, I can't have a fucking assistant who uses a Nikon. You need a Leica. Jim, and they're very expensive.
I know.
And I mean, the body itself is like $5,000, right? And so I was like, Jim, I can't afford a Leica. He goes, I'll get you one. So he called Sammy's camera in LA, which was a rental for camera equipment. He said, Sammy, I'll trade you 5 Rolling Stone photographs for a Leica for my assistant. And he said, okay. So he traded Rolling Stone's photos, and I got a Leica camera. And it was so new to me. And it's very, but once you get the hang of it, there's nothing like it. And that's the camera Jim used, and that's how he was able to get exactly what he saw, because he knew his equipment so well that it was like an extension of himself. So he always carried about 5 different Leicas around his neck, loaded with black and white and color. And he knew with fixed lenses, so it's not like he had a zoom lens, right? So he had fixed lenses of 50 millimeter, 28, different ones. He would go into the situation, all natural light. He did not like to use artificial light at all. Natural was his lighting of choice. And he would know exactly, looking at, the situation he was in, which lens to use, what to set the f-stop and aperture at and the film speed, and just go in and take. So he could do it through his gut, because he didn't have to worry about fiddling around with his camera. He knew it so well that he could just go in there and start taking photos and really capture that moment on his camera, where a lot of other photographers, they kind of come out with their light meter and they do the light and, okay, I need to do this and that. Jim was self-taught, which was great. So
Yeah.
he taught himself, which is the best way, I think, sometimes to learn
Yeah.
an art form.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've been doing gig photography for about 5 years, and if Jim was upset with you for having a Nikon, he would have hated my company because it's a Sony A7 III. And I see that Julian Lennon, I think, is a Leica guy. Julian
Yes.
will do a lot of photography, obviously, and it's a big part of his life, and
Yeah.
chats quite a bit about the Leica. So yeah, there's
Yeah.
no, it's wonderful, wonderful
He's a
stuff.
good photographer too. He's
He
a great
absolutely is.
photographer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Paul McCartney. It's interesting because once we start getting into the book,
Yeah.
you can see that the Beatles themselves had cameras as well, like Ringo, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and there just was a big show that Paul McCartney had here in San Francisco. It's traveled, and it was his photography that he took when they were touring. And he doesn't profess to be a professional photographer. He's like, these are just photos that I took as the tour was happening. And he has a very good eye. I mean,
Yes,
some of the photos he took of John Lennon in natural light are beautiful.
they
They're
are.
really beautiful.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. And George has a book from the Harrison estate coming out later in the year, which is
Right.
Olivia's collection of his own images from that similar period, which is going to be something else as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And Ringo published a book 10 years. I think it must have been about 10 years ago. And his are really interesting too, because his were from being inside the cars,
Yes.
looking out at the fans that were going crazy, all the women that were screaming and crying. And so it was a really interesting perspective, I thought,
Yeah.
of, you felt like you were Ringo.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a dear friend of mine, will often go to gigs and do photography. And he had said, to paraphrase him, the camera got him out of his own head and into the world. That was,
Yeah,
it was the doorway into escaping overthinking and
yeah,
seeing life, and then doing a lot
yeah,
of street photography and seeing people rather than just knowing they're there, but actually to see people and say, oh, there's a story. There's a story. So there's something to be said for the camera beyond the immediate obvious. But we could go down
yes.
a rabbit hole here and talk photography for a very long time. If if we just go back in time a little bit to 1966, the Beatles at Candlestick Park, even before we get to that moment where Jim's very present, he was already very well established in the rock scene, particularly with his camera and his work. I again saw that quote from Annie Leibovitz, no
Yeah.
less, who said that he is the rock and roll photographer, the rock and roll photographer, as we learn in the book. Why do you think musicians particularly enjoyed him? I remember seeing an interview with Bob Groon, and
Mhm.
he was saying, to paraphrase him, when he was getting these beautiful intimate studio shots of John and Yoko in the early 70s with the Elephant's Memory Band, that
Mhm.
he felt what worked for him was he wasn't intrusive. He was
Mhm.
quiet, and he wasn't trying to orchestrate anything. And
Right.
he was making the comment that he thinks that's one of the reasons, like that CBGB scene in New
Mhm.
York, that artists embraced him because he was kind of in the ether. What do you
Yeah.
think was, could you tell us a little bit about Jim pre 66 in that scene? And what do you
Yeah.
think it is that had artists love his company?
Yeah. Well, Jim actually first, he was self-taught. So he first started photographing in 1959.
Well,
He bought himself a Leica camera, which was very expensive. So he bought it on consignment. He had to pay it off. And once he paid it off in San Francisco in 1959, 1960, jazz was huge in North Beach in San Francisco. So you had all the jazz greats. You also had the beat poets. So you had City Lights bookstore there. So Jim had just a wonderful subjects to photograph. So he took that Leica camera and he just started photographing and going into all the smoky old, jazz clubs where there was barely any light. And a lot of the musicians, they were all African American. And so it was a very difficult situation to photograph. And Jim nailed it. I mean, he got to the point where, again, where he just nailed it. And that's where he met a lot and befriended a lot of the jazz greats that were friends with him for the rest of his life. He met John Coltrane there, he met Miles Davis. So that's where he really started to photograph. He made a name for himself on the West Coast with the record labels in those early 60s with jazz. And he decided, I need to make a name with the other um, basically recording labels. So he moved to New York. So from 1962 to 1964, Jim lived in New York. And that's where he met Bob Dylan and in the Village. And that famous photo of Bob Dylan rolling a tire is Jim's. He photographed Monk in his apartment with his baby grand piano in the kitchen. He did a lot of folk and a lot of jazz and really made a name for himself in New York. So then he was like, I want to go back to San Francisco. But when he was on the East Coast, he also did a lot of civil rights photography too. He did a lot, which a lot of people don't know. They just know Jim for music photography. But he always said he was a reporter with a camera. And that's how he thought of himself. He was a reporter who was documenting with his camera what he was seeing and what was going on. And so the music sometimes led him to different things.
mm,
And he's got some incredible photographs of Hazard, Kentucky, that he did of a coal mining town. and it's severe poverty. They lived in houses made out of cardboard boxes, and they have black marks around their mouths and their faces, and that's actually from inhaling coal. So it's coal sores.
Huh.
So Jim did a whole series on poverty in America based on these photos that he took. And they're just, it feels like you're back at Dorothea Lange's Dust Bowl and photographs from the 1930s of the depression that was happening. They're gorgeous. Then he went down to Mississippi and photographed when the SNCC sent students down there to sign up blacks to vote and show them how to register and how to vote. This was in 64. So it was Freedom Summer.
Hmm.
And that's when the Ku Klux Klan had kidnapped 3 students and killed them. One of them was James Chaney, who was black. And Jim was down there when James Chaney's mother got the news that they found her son's body. So some incredibly, really just beautiful photography that Jim has taken besides the music.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so he took that, then he came back to San Francisco right at the tail end of 1964. And there you go, 1965 is really the start of the whole counterculture movement in the Haight-Ashbury. And that's when the Grateful Dead formed, Jefferson Airplane, the Charlatans, Quicksilver Messenger Service, all of these groups were forming, and Jim was right there.
Yeah.
And he befriended them because by this time they knew who he was. He was an established photographer that had done a lot of labeled album covers for the jazz musicians, and like the Grateful Dead, a lot of them, were jazz musicians before they formed the
Mm.
Grateful Dead. So they had seen Jim's work and knew who he was and really wanted to be photographed by him. And so he was able to befriend them, and they let him into their, inner circles and their world. And they all knew, they trusted him. And Jim also said one of the things he was most proud of is the trust that he got between himself and the musicians, because they knew he would never betray their trust by publishing a compromising photograph of them
Mm.
or a really bad photograph of them. So it was there for everything, when
Yeah.
they were taking drugs and partying and doing things, but he would never show that. So again, Jim they let him in. He had these cameras around his neck. He would start photographing, so he kind of disappeared. They all were like, oh, that's just Jim. So then he disappeared, and he was able to get these incredibly, very intimate photographs of a lot of the musicians, because it was like he wasn't there,
Mm.
which was such an amazing skill, especially some of the ones where he was using a fixed lens, a 50 millimeter lens, to get a portrait of somebody meant he was like right here,
Yeah.
really, really close. And for him to be able to get that and them not even be aware of him being there is kind of incredible, and a testament to the skill of Jim and how he was able to really, you know, I hate this word, but a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
really was.
I get the
So
feeling that your curating of his work is a labor of love for you.
it is.
Yeah.
Well, with Jim didn't have any children, thankfully. I think he would have been a horrible, horrible parent. Um, but, he had two failed marriages, because photography was his life. And photography really was his first love. So he devoted his entire life to photography, and he didn't really have room for anything else. But that's why he has the body of work he does, because his life was his photography, and he considered his photographs his children.
Hmm.
And he really protected them and cared for them when he was alive. So what he said to me was, the only person I trust to take care of my children when I'm gone is you.
It's
And
great.
so when Jim died in 2010, unexpectedly, I then inherited over 1 million babies. And, he was my friend, and he entrusted me with his children. And so I am just as protective of them as Jim was when he was alive. But for me, I love doing it because I love photography. I love the stories that they tell. And a lot of what's happening today in the world happened when Jim was photographing. He did a lot of protest marches and a lot of protests too for anti-war, anti-nuclear armament. Um, you know, lots of stuff that is so relevant right now. So, and what Jim did too is sometimes he didn't show all of his photography. He liked to show what he knew sold.
Yeah.
So he showed a lot of the same things over and over and over again. I think with his really intimate stuff, I think it was so personal. He was afraid to put it out in the world because if people didn't like it, he would be really devastated.
Mm.
But now that he's gone and the roadblock is gone, I can now show that and share those photographs with the world. This incredible body of work that this man documented.
Yeah.
And so I really do enjoy, I feel like an archaeologist going on a dig and finding these treasures and saying, oh my God, we have to, show the world this. It's great.
Yeah, that's a really lovely segue into this particular book that's honouring the 60th anniversary of the Beatles at Candlestick Park, which of course is a milestone in their particular journey. How does Jim begin to find himself the man behind the lens at Candlestick Park? And then could we go from that into the time from the idea to the book being created? And it's a beautiful book. I'd love to know how he found himself there and then the time spent in the creation and the assembly of the book.
Sure. Yeah, well, Jim did not photograph the Beatles in 1964 when they were at the Cow Palace here in San Francisco because he was on the East Coast. So he was doing other stuff. So then by 1965, when the Beatles came and played at the Cow Palace in San Francisco again, Jim was there and he photographed the Beatles at that particular moment. But the Beatles also knew who Jim was because of all of his music photography and the labels and the covers that he got. So in 66, when they played at Candlestick for their last live public concert, they asked Jim to be the photographer because they knew he was so good at not only taking behind the scene photographs, but also live photographs. So they actually requested Jim to photograph them at this concert, and he did, and they're beautiful. And again, Jim maybe showed 10 of the photographs
Mm.
from that concert, which are iconic and kind of woven into the history of the Beatles. But there was so many more, and so I really wanted to do a proper book that showed all of from that session. There were about, and it was one day. So there's literally only 16 proof sheets. That's it. And he only shot black and white. So I had just finished a book on the Grateful Dead with Chronicle Books, who's the publisher. And we were doing a book signing for the Grateful Dead. And they came up to me and they said, what's going to be the next book? I thought, oh my God, we just finished this book on the Grateful Dead. And I thought about it and I was like, I know. Next year is the 60th anniversary of the Beatles' last concert at Candlestick Park. Why don't we do that? And they were like, yes, that's great. Let's do that. And so we turned it around very quickly, much quicker than we normally do, to make sure that we could get it out for this time period. And I was lucky because it was just 16 proof sheets as opposed to the Grateful Dead book that we did that was like 500 proof sheets. I mean, it was huge. So I knew we could do it in a shorter amount of time. And then Joel Selvin, who is a music historian and was very good friends with Jim and has been a very good friend of mine and Jim's archive. I was like, Joel, we have a very short timeline. Can you write the text for this? And he goes, for you, yes, I will do it. And so he wrote the text. And I love Joel's writing because it's humorous. It can be snarky, but it's real. And he did such a great job in the writing of the book. So yeah, we include all the proof sheets. I like to include proof sheets in whatever book we do of Jim's, because so many people today, it's all digital photography,
Yeah,
right? And they don't know that, some people don't know what a proof sheet is, because
true.
with digital photography, you don't need a proof sheet, right? You just take thousands upon thousands of frames, you slam it into Photoshop, you can manipulate it and do what you need.
Yeah,
And they don't realize that that's not, these guys were very skilled and talented. And Jim had a manual camera. There was nothing automatic about it, you know. And when he took a shot on that roll of film, you don't really know until it's developed if it came out or not. So you have to wait. And if you wreck that whole roll of film, you're screwed,
yeah,
right? So so Jim was a master. He had to be, because that was his bread and butter, you know. And if that didn't come out, he wasn't going to make any money. Um, and then it's also interesting to see, it shows the train of thought, I think, of Jim. It's like a writer's notebook, where they do their notes, and then you can kind of get into their head on what
mm,
they're thinking about. Well, with the proof sheet, you can kind of see what Jim was thinking and what he was coming to. And the incredible thing about his proof sheets is every single frame is iconic.
yeah,
There's not one bad photograph. And so, and then they had grease pencils, which is when a photographer found the image that they liked, they would then mark it with a
mm,
yellow, red, or blue grease pencil, like this is the one. And so it shows up on the proof sheets. And I just think it's a great history of photography for people to be able to see that and know what these photographers, the train of thought they were in, what the tools they had, and how they came out with these amazingly iconic proof sheets, iconic images. And
yeah,
it's what I found humorous to these photos is it was at Candlestick Park, which was a baseball stadium. So the backstage were the locker rooms.
mm,
So there was no, it was like bare bones. They were locker rooms to these sports players. And there was a caterer, Simpson's, that was in North Beach, that catered the event for the Beatles. So what they did is they brought white tablecloths and put the white tablecloth so it looked a little bit better, rather than these cubby holes of sports stuff. And the Beatles are sitting there and they're bored out of their minds. They're doodling on the tablecloth. They're chain smoking. They're drinking tea. They're not drinking alcohol like most rock
yeah,
stars are guzzling Jack Daniels. They're drinking tea and smoking and doodling. And I just thought it's so fun to show that, because people, they always see them live and the fans screaming and crying and throwing themselves on the stage. But when that doesn't happen, most musicians are really bored before they
yeah,
go on stage, because they're just sitting back there waiting. And again, I think this was Jim kind of showing people that it's not all this crazy fandom and adornment. There are times when you're really just bored waiting to go onto stage. And
yeah,
Jim was so good at that. So in these photos, you can see all of that. And the dreaded meet and greets, where you
yeah,
have to, people come and meet and greet, and then you have reporters, newspaper reporters, radio stations, and so you're being bombarded by people asking you questions. And I mean, you can see all of that in these photographs.
yeah. So well described that. I love how you describe that process of going back and looking at proof sheets and follow. That'll send me back to the book. Just following what might be the thing that he's fishing for or seeking, which I think is a fascinating sort of a window, almost quite literally, into the
Yeah,
process. You talk a
yeah,
little bit about the tablecloth. I love realizing that I didn't know the story of. There's some great images there with Joan Baez sitting with them, and everyone looks so casual and no one's working a camera at all. They're just in each other's company. And
right.
I was fascinated by the story of, to your point about boredom, they end up creating art
Yeah,
and of their own kind,
right.
drawing on the tablecloth. I had no idea of
Yeah.
that tale. Could you share that with us? I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, sure. So they were sitting there doodling, And like I said, Simpson's, which was a restaurant in North Beach in San Francisco, they catered it. And they served them, like steak. And it was just a really nice spread of food. And they were very proud of themselves and that they were catering to the Beatles. And so when the concert was over, as a thank you to the caterers, the Beatles signed the tablecloth and gave it to them. So they were so ecstatic. They were, oh my God, this is amazing. So they went back to their restaurant in North Beach and displayed it in the window. And within 5 days, somebody broke the window, stole the tablecloth, and it was never to be seen again until 2022, when the grandson of the caterer got a phone call from somebody in Texas saying, I think I have your property. And I inherited this somehow. I inherited this and it's not mine, and I'd like to give it back to the rightful owners, which is you. So he gave back the tablecloth to the grandson,
Wow.
and then the family decided to auction it off. And so Bonhams auctioned it off, and I think, what was it, $88,000 back in 2022.
Yeah.
But funny enough, the way Bonhams authenticated the tablecloth was by using a Jim Marshall photograph
Yeah.
from that last concert of them doodling on the tablecloth. So Jim got to authenticate the tablecloth.
Such a great story. As a bit of the sidebar, when you in quieter moments with Jim, did he have any particularly fond memories of interactions with any of the four where beyond celebrity, just, the humanity of one of them that might have struck him?
Yeah, I mean, I think he enjoyed, in a lot of the photographs, Jim photographed Ringo. And I think, because Ringo was kind of goofy and fooling around. And so he was easy to kind of, um, I don't know, befriend, right? But I think he also befriended all of them and
Mm.
really respected them for their choices that they were making musically, and also that they were photographers themselves. Because
Yeah.
on some of those photographs, you can see their cameras on the table. So I think they also had that in common, that they could talk about, they had an understanding of photography and they could talk
Mm.
about it. And they could also, because Jim, could also talk about what it was like, in a sense, being a photographer and also having to perform, in a
Mm.
sense.
Mm.
So he did have to perform and he did have to produce things that people either liked or they didn't, and be criticized or not. So I think there are many different levels that he was able to um, talk to the Beatles about. And they were intelligent guys, they were
Mm.
interesting guys. And so I don't think it was that hard for him to
Mm.
befriend them and really, kind of meld.
Yeah, and I guess by that time too, he seems to be someone that wouldn't have suffered fools and was not
Yeah.
easily starstruck. Just by listening to you, that that we're just here, it's just people and it's just moments, and
Yeah.
that must have helped him keep an even
It did.
eye. Yeah.
Yeah, it did, because Jim also, he liked to test people. I mean, he could be he could be an asshole. He really could. Um, and he could say the craziest stuff could come out of his mouth. But a lot of times that was him testing you,
Sure.
you know. And one of the reasons Jim and I got along is my mother swore like a sailor.
Yeah.
So I was used to swear words and having that. So by the time Jim came around into my life and he would, you dumb asshole, or say something, I'd be like, don't you talk to me that way, you fucker. And he was like, whoa, because I don't think he was used to people
Yeah.
giving it back to him. And so he was like, okay, you're okay. And that's how he would test musicians too. He would say crazy things and see how
Yeah.
they would react. And if some of them were like, what are you talking about, you more, if they would come back or not. And so that's how he would kind of test if they were okay or not, if he would get along with them or not.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Jim was he was a complicated person.
I
Very
think the
complicated.
story of you and Jim and that dynamic is a book in itself at some point. That sounds like it's waiting to be done.
Well, we have a documentary. I don't know if you know. I did a documentary on Jim in 2019, and it's
Right.
on Tubi if it's free. And it's called Show Me the Picture, the story of Jim
Ah,
Marshall.
great.
And you should watch it, and all of your listeners should watch it because it encompasses all of Jim. I mean, everything, his entire body of work. And the only problem was it was right when COVID hit, when we
Ah,
started showing in film festivals and things like that. COVID hit, but we did win the San Francisco International Film Festival's Audience Award,
mm.
and we did get a Grierson Award, which is like the British Oscar Awards for documentaries. We won best music documentary.
Oh, wow.
So I'm really proud of it. It's completely, we did not edit Jim as a human being at all. So warts and all, because that's the way Jim lived his life. He was like, you either accept me or you don't. I am this way. And, I really hate it when some archives and take over and they try and edit things out from that person. Like, oh, they didn't smoke, they didn't do drugs. We can't show that stuff. Well, that's not real then. You're not telling the whole story. I
Mm,
mean, this person, everybody has ups and downs in their life.
yeah.
And you need to show a truthful um, interpretation of that person. So we're lucky we found archival footage of Jim talking as well. So
Wonderful.
you can hear himself talking about his photography, which is great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
That's great. I'm sorry I missed that in my research. I'll definitely do a little bit
No,
of
don't do
digging.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, you
get,
should definitely watch it.
absolutely, I'll chase that down. I get the sense that Chronicle is a great partner creatively for you also, and seem to be, just with some of the things you've said,
Yeah.
seem to be right in step with you on the how to go about curating the work and presenting it. That must be a great thing to have a partner like that.
It's wonderful. I feel so fortunate and lucky that Chronicle Books. Jim worked with Chronicle Books when he was alive. He did what were the two books? He did Proof, which are his proof sheets. It's a whole book of his proof sheets, and it's beautiful. It's out of print, but if people can find it, you should. It's beautiful. It's his proof sheet, and then the hero shot that he picked from that proof sheet is on the other page.
Mm,
So he did Proof, and then he did Jazz, which is his jazz photography too. So he already had a relationship with Chronicle Books, and they're based in San Francisco. So for me, it's wonderful because they're here.
yeah.
And I've developed a great relationship with them. We've done 4 books now on Jim's photography. And so when I have to proof the pages and things, I just, drive down to their headquarters and we are there and we proof it. And they're really wonderful to collaborate with.
Mm.
So, say, no, I don't think this is a great photograph, or this is the order we should do it in. And so it's been wonderful. And for the past 5 books, I've had the same editor and the same designer. And so
Mm.
it's wonderful. So we kind of know each other and are
Yeah.
able to creatively, come together on what we want.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. There's so much in the book. I think it's page 133. I made a note. My all-time favorite photograph in their career of Paul and George together is one of Jim's, and it's been out there, like you were saying before. Some of those photos are just iconic, and
Yeah.
they're looking into each other's souls, and there's this genuine smile between them. It's not a staged moment. When you look long at that
Yeah.
photograph, it's two guys that clearly love each other when it's all said and done,
Yeah.
and you can almost see
Yeah.
this. Look at this. And it's
Yeah.
all there in just that one image, and they're so smiley at one another. It's so real.
Yeah.
Do you have photographs that you would immediately say, yeah, these are the ones that I really love, and for what particular reason?
Well, I mean, I love all of Jim's photography. For me, sometimes it's not necessarily the Beatles themselves,
Yeah.
but the other little details he catches.
Mm.
And one that I absolutely love is the blonde woman coming out of the armored car
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
there's two um, guards
Yeah.
that flank her. And
And it's just her
every,
head at the top there. I think she
yeah,
was
she's just peeking out.
Miss Teen something, I think, from memory.
Miss Teen International, 1966. But we didn't. So that has been out there, but nobody has identified her. And so one of the things that I really wanted to do with this book was try to identify as many people as we could. I was like, let's do it, you know? And with that, once I had the negative scanned, I could blow it up really big. So I blew it up and it looked like there was like a beauty pageant sash on. So we started looking at it and said, Miss Teen Inter, and we go, God, I think that might be Miss Teen International. And so we looked it up and it was Miss Teen International 1966. Her name was Iwa Allen.
Yeah.
She's Swedish. And we're like, oh my God, we found her. And so we did that. But I'd love to know the story of why she was there with them. So I think she came with them from LA
Right.
and, and went with them. And then 2 years later, she was in a movie with Ringo called Candy.
Huh. There you go.
So it was really interesting. So I love that because it's just like, I don't think anybody else would have captured that but Jim. You know, like he was always, even though the subject he was photographing, he was still looking around at the audience and the
Yeah.
street and the people and everything that was going on around it. So I don't think another photographer would have caught that.
Yeah, that's fascinating because just in that one image, there's 1,000 questions. So,
Exactly, exactly. And it's funny too, because as the Beatles are coming off the stairs of the airplane, Jim could always find the most beautiful woman in a crowd, and he always takes a picture of it. And so whenever I'm looking through proof sheets, I'm like, there he is again. I mean, and there's this beautiful stewardess that he had to get into the frame at the top
wow.
of the stairs. And it's funny. I mean, that we did a Rolling Stone book, and sure enough, in the crowd that Jim photographed, there's this beautiful woman. And so Jim photographed her. It's great.
Yeah, that's terrific. The book is The Beatles by Jim Marshall, live at Candlestick Park, 1966. It's a terrific achievement, a wonderful visual capture of that period in the perfect year as we celebrate 60 years of that defining moment for them.
Yeah.
What is next for you? What continues to keep you motivated and excited? What other projects might be coming down the road?
Well, I would love to do a book of Jim's street photography.
Yeah,
So, I'm trying to look into that because I think it's such an interesting part of Jim that people don't know. Basically because in the early 60s, there wasn't rock and roll, that wasn't around yet. It was just jazz, but he also would roam the streets. And I like to say he had a curious eye and he would, again, pick up things that most people wouldn't think were that significant, like a peace symbol. Jim, we have a book called Peace that came out, and Jim literally took photographs of the peace symbol wherever he saw it, starting in 1960 to 1969
hmm.
at Woodstock. It was then. But, I just think it's fascinating that Jim would find these little things that meant so much. And the peace symbol did end up becoming a very important symbol for many different things over history. And Jim documented that. So I think he had an innate sense of things that were significant that
Yeah,
somebody may just pass by, but he would see and he'd be like, I'm going to document that, and he'd
yeah,
take a picture. And so it's I'd love to get that part of Jim out there in the world and show that side of him.
yeah. He seems like it's a great American story in every sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, he
What,
was he was Assyrian. He called himself Assyrian, which
yeah,
is basically Iranian.
yeah.
So he he actually he grew up poor, and he, I think, really had a chip on his shoulder because he wasn't, this blonde, blue-eyed guy. And so he really gravitated towards the underdog in
Mm.
his photography because he knew what it was like. And, you know, he was discreet. He looked fine. He was handsome. He was very handsome. And I would say that to him, like, God, Jim, when you were young, you're handsome. He'd go, fuck you, Davis. I'd say, no, I'm not being facetious. You were
Yeah.
very handsome. But he was very insecure because, you know, he had a history of being discriminated against. So I think that's one of the reasons he was drawn to the African American
Mm.
jazz musicians and really wanted them to show them and give them, you know, the appraisal that the praise that they deserved really for because a lot of times, you know, they weren't getting as much attention as they should have
Mm.
because they were Black. And so Jim really tried to help the underdog. He almost looked for an underdog that he could photograph. And he
Yeah.
did. And that was one of the greatest parts of Jim, I think.
Yeah. Again, beautifully said. If people wanted to find out more about Jim and track down the book, where best to go?
The best place to go is probably our website, which is www.jimmarshallphotographyllc.com. But the book is sold anywhere for the Beatles book. Anywhere you buy your books, go ahead. Independent booksellers, I always like to give a shout out to them.
Yeah.
But of course, it's on Amazon.
Yes.
But it's everywhere you can buy your book. And then, you know, if you want to learn more about Jim too, I encourage we have social media. We have our Instagram and Facebook, and I like to really post a lot of things on there that I'll find, you know, randomly and post them on there. So you can learn more about Jim and his photography from our social media, which is just Jim Marshall Photo,
Gotcha.
and we're on Facebook and Instagram.
You're clearly a wonderful representative of the man and his legacy. And thank you for being so open and vulnerable, because your own story is quite remarkable too. Everyone's a book when you spend enough time with them, aren't they? Once you start peeling back layers of people, everyone's got chapters. But thank you for being so reflective and honest in sharing these stories with me today on the podcast. It's been terrific to sit and speak with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
All the best for everything ahead.
All right. Thank you. And watch the documentary. I think you're going to love it.
We'll track that down. Thanks again, Amelia.
Okay. Thank you.